The city was burning. High Arbiter Selenthra stood at the window of the command tower and watched the orange flames rise from the eastern district. Another bombing, another 1,000 dead. She pressed her old, tired hand against the cold glass and closed her eyes. 6 months ago, the Valen Confederacy had been at peace. 7 species living together across 40 worlds. They had art and music and science. They had believed that war was a thing of the past. Then the Krath came. The Krath Dominion was everything the Confederacy was not. They were conquerors. They took what they wanted and killed anyone who stood in their way. Their ships were weapons of terror, black and sharp like the claws of some great beast. In 6 months, they had taken 3 of the Confederacy's core worlds. Millions were dead. Millions more were slaves. Selenthra turned away from the window. Her scales, once bright blue and shining, had grown dull with age and worry. She was old now, too old for war. But there was no one else left to lead. "Arbiter," said a voice behind her. It was Counselor Tyvan, a tall insectoid Mahari with 4 arms and compound eyes that never seemed to blink. "The military council is waiting." She nodded and followed him down the long corridor to the war room. The room was full of generals and admirals, but their faces told the story before anyone spoke. They had lost. The Confederacy fleet was broken. Only 60 ships remained from what had once been 300. The Krath had over 400 warships and more coming every day. "We cannot win this war," said Admiral Vornesh, an old soldier with scars across his face. "We can only delay our defeat. Perhaps buy enough time to evacuate some civilians." "How long?" Selenthra asked. 2 weeks, maybe 3. Then they will reach the homeworld." Silence filled the room. 2 weeks. After thousands of years of civilization, the Velen people had 2 weeks left. Selenthra looked around the table at the faces of her people. Fear, despair, acceptance of death. She had seen these faces before, long ago, when she was young and foolish and believed that diplomacy could solve anything. "There is one option we have not tried," she said quietly. The room turned to look at her. "The humans?" Counselor Tyvan made a sound of surprise. "The humans? Arbiter, they are barely more than primitives. They joined Galactic Society only 40 years ago. They have no fleet, no power, no—" "They have something," Selenthra interrupted. "I met one of their ambassadors once, many years ago. He spoke of something called paying it forward. When I asked what it meant, he said that humans believe in helping those who cannot help themselves. Not for reward, not for power, simply because it is right." "With respect, Arbiter, we need warships, not philosophy," said Admiral Vornesh. "I know." Selenthra sat down heavily in her chair. "I know it is foolish. I know they probably cannot help us. But we have tried everything else. We have begged the other powers for aid, and they have refused. They are too afraid of the Krath. The humans are our last hope." The council argued for an hour. Some said it was a waste of time. Others said it was beneath their dignity to ask primitives for help. But in the end, they had no other choice. That night, Selenthra authorized the transmission of a distress beacon. It was aimed at the galactic fringe, toward the small blue planet called Earth. The message was simple. "We are dying. Please help us." She did not expect an answer. 3 days later, a response came. The communication officer burst into her quarters at midnight, his eyes wide with shock. "Arbiter, the humans have responded." Selenthra's heart jumped. "What do they say? Are they sending a fleet?" The officer handed her the message with shaking hands. She read it once, then again, then a third time, hoping the words would change. They did not. "One vessel en route. ETA, 14 cycles. One vessel, one ship, against 400 Krath warships." She sat down slowly on the edge of her bed. Behind her, the officer waited in nervous silence. "Arbiter, what should we tell the council?" Selenthra stared at the message for a long time. One ship. It was nothing. It was less than nothing. The Krath would crush it like an insect. But the humans had answered. Of all the species in the galaxy, only the humans had answered. "Tell them help is coming," she said at last. Her voice was hollow. "Tell them to hold on for 14 more cycles." The officer left. Selenthra sat alone in the darkness of her room, holding the message in her old hands. One ship. She had asked for a miracle. The universe had sent her a joke. But still, somewhere deep in her heart, a small flame of hope refused to die. The humans had answered. They had not ignored her cry. They had not laughed at her desperation. They had sent something. Perhaps, she thought, perhaps one ship was all they had. Perhaps they were giving everything they could. Or perhaps the humans knew something that the rest of the galaxy did not. She would find out in 14 cycles. Outside her window, the fires continued to burn. The ship came out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Velen system. Every sensor on the orbital station turned toward it. Every eye watched. Every heart hoped. And then they saw it. The UNS Prometheus was small. It was smaller than a craft destroyer, smaller even than some Velan patrol ships. It was gray and plain and ugly. It had no beautiful curves, no shining metal, no impressive weapons visible on its hull. It looked like something a worker might build in a factory, not a warship meant to save a civilization. Counselor Tyvan stood in the observation room with High Arbiter Selenthra. His compound eyes stared at the approaching vessel, and his forearms hung limp at his sides. "This is it?" he asked. His voice was flat, dead. "This is what they sent?" Selenthra did not answer. She could not. The hope she had carried for 14 cycles was dying in her chest. The Prometheus requested permission to dock. The station granted it automatically. What else could they do? 20 minutes later, Selenthra and Tyvan stood in the docking bay, watching the human ship's door open. A small group of humans walked out. There were perhaps 30 of them, all wearing simple gray uniforms. They moved in a strange way, smooth and quiet, like predators walking through tall grass. At their front was a woman. She was short, shorter than Selenthra had expected. Her hair was cut close to her head, and her eyes were calm and dark. She walked up to them and stopped. "High Arbiter Selenthra?" she asked. Her voice was soft but clear. "Yes. You are the commander of this vessel?" "Commander Ilara Chen, UNS Prometheus." She gave a small bow. "Thank you for receiving us." Tyvan stepped forward. He tried to keep his voice polite, but his disappointment was obvious. "Commander Chen, forgive me, but we must ask, is this vessel a scout ship? When does your main fleet arrive?" Chen looked at him. Her face showed nothing. "This is what we sent, Counselor. May I speak with your military commanders?" Tyvan's arms twitched with frustration. "Commander, the Krath have 400 warships. They will reach our homeworld in less than 10 days. With respect, what can one small ship do against such a force?" "That is what I would like to discuss with your military commanders," Chen said again. Her voice did not change. Her eyes did not blink. Selenthra placed a hand on Tyvan's arm. "Take her to the war room. Let her speak." The war room was crowded with admirals and generals who looked at the human commander with the same disappointment that Tyvan had shown. Admiral Vornash was the first to speak. "Commander Chen, please understand our position. We are grateful that humanity answered our call, but we are facing extinction. We need fleets and weapons and soldiers. One ship cannot change our fate." Chen nodded slowly. "I understand, Admiral. May I ask some questions?" Vornash spread his hands. "Of course." But the questions Chen asked were strange. She did not ask about fleet positions or weapon systems. She did not ask about defensive lines or battle plans. Instead, she asked about evacuation routes for civilians. She asked about the communication frequencies the Krath used. She asked for information about Krath supply lines and where they stored their fuel. Then her questions became stranger still. "Tell me about the Krath commanders. What are they like? What do they fear? What do they believe happens when they die?" Admiral Vornash stared at her. "What does that have to do with anything?" "Everything," Chen said simply. She asked for star charts showing nearby nebulae and asteroid fields. She asked about Krath funeral ceremonies. She asked how their soldiers were promoted and what happened to commanders who failed. For 2 hours, she asked questions. The Velen officers answered as best they could, growing more confused with each passing minute. Finally, Admiral Vornash could not contain himself any longer. "Commander Chen, what is your strategy? What are you planning to do?" Chen stood up from the table. She looked around the room at all the faces watching her. "We do not fight wars the way you do," she said. You fight to destroy enemy ships. You fight to hold territory. You fight to win battles. She paused. We fight to break the enemy's will to continue. We fight to make them afraid. We fight to make them believe that fighting us is worse than losing to us. The room was silent. The Krath have never faced a human enemy, Chen continued. They do not know what we are capable of. They do not know how we think. They do not know what we will do. She turned and walked toward the door. At the threshold, she stopped and looked back. In 10 days, they will learn, and they will wish they had never heard the name of humanity. She left the room. Behind her, the Velen officer sat in stunned silence. Selenthra looked at Tyvan. The counselor's compound eyes were wide. What kind of species, Tyvan whispered, sends one ship against 400 and speaks of victory? Selenthra did not answer, but for the first time in months, the flame of hope in her chest burned a little brighter. Lord Kethavor stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Immortal Claw, and watched his armada move through space. 400 warships, each one a machine of death and destruction. Behind him, his officers worked in respectful silence. Before him, the stars waited to be conquered. The Valen homeworld was 8 days away. In 8 days, the war would be over. The Confederacy would fall. Millions more slaves would fill the labor camps. And Lord Kethavor would return home as the greatest conqueror in Krath history. He smiled. His teeth were sharp and black, like the rest of his kind. The Krath were predators. They were born to hunt, to kill, to dominate. The weak existed only to serve the strong. This was the natural order of the universe. My lord, said his communications officer, we have lost contact with Supply Convoy 12. Kethavor turned his head slightly. What happened? Unknown, my lord. They entered the asteroid belt in Sector 9 and stopped responding. No distress signal. No communication of any kind. Kethavor frowned. Supply convoys did not simply disappear. Send a patrol to investigate. Yes, my lord. An hour later, the patrol reported back. The convoy was gone. All 5 ships vanished. There was no debris, no bodies, no sign of battle. They had simply ceased to exist. Kethavor felt a small flicker of unease, but he pushed it away. Equipment failures happened. Perhaps the convoy had been caught in an asteroid collision. Perhaps their communications had failed. It was nothing. The next day, a communications relay station went dark. Then another. Then 3 more in different sectors. My lord, said the intelligence officer, her voice uncertain, we are receiving reports of strange signals on our military frequencies. Someone is broadcasting music. Music. Krath death hymns, my lord. The songs we sing for warriors who fall in battle. Kethavor's eyes narrowed. Who is broadcasting them? We cannot trace the source. It seems to come from everywhere and nowhere. That night, the flagship of 2nd Commander Rathnal exploded. The ship was in the center of the formation, surrounded by dozens of other vessels. There was no attack from outside. The explosion came from within. Security footage was recovered from a surviving data core. Kethavor watched it in his private quarters, alone. The footage showed the interior of Rathnal's ship. At first, everything was normal. Officers worked at their stations. Guards patrolled the corridors. Then something moved in the shadows. Kethavor leaned forward, his eyes wide. A figure emerged from the darkness. It was small, smaller than a Krath warrior. It wore armor that seemed to absorb light, making it almost invisible against the dark walls of the ship. It moved with terrible speed and silence. The first guard died without making a sound. The figure's blade passed through his throat so quickly that his body did not fall for 2 full seconds. The second guard turned and raised his weapon. The figure shot him in the face, then moved on before he hit the ground. Room by room, corridor by corridor, the figure cut through the ship. It killed with perfect efficiency. No wasted movement, no hesitation, no mercy. In 6 minutes, it reached the engine room. It planted something on the main reactor. Then it disappeared. 30 seconds later, the ship exploded. Kethavor stopped the footage. His hands were shaking. One single creature had killed 43 Krath warriors and destroyed a warship from the inside. A human. He called for his fleet commanders. When they arrived, he saw the fear in their eyes. They had seen the footage too. Find that ship, Kethavor ordered. Find it and destroy it. They searched. They hunted. They sent dozens of patrols into every corner of the sector. They found nothing. But the attacks continued. A fuel depot exploded in the night. A sensor station was found with every crew member dead, their throats cut while they slept. A battleship captain went mad and flew his vessel into an asteroid, screaming about ghosts in the walls. And always, always the death hymns played on the military frequencies. The Prometheus was everywhere. It struck without warning and vanished without trace. It used the nebulae to hide its signature. It hid in asteroid fields. It moved through the fleet like a predator through a herd of prey. Kethvor stopped sleeping. Every shadow seemed to hide death. Every sound made him reach for his weapon. He posted guards outside his quarters, then doubled them, then tripled them. His officers began to whisper. They said the humans had sent a demon. They said the Prometheus was crewed by the dead, by spirits that could not be killed. They said that anyone who saw the ship was marked for death. Kethvor tried to stop the rumors. He executed 3 officers for spreading fear, but the whispers only grew louder. One morning he found a message on his personal terminal. No one knew how it had gotten there. No one could trace its source. The message had only 3 words: "We see you." Lord Kethvor, Supreme Commander of the Krath Dominion, Conqueror of Worlds, looked at those words and felt something he had never felt before: fear. The Velen Council sat in the war room and stared at the reports. They read them once, then twice, then again. They could not believe what they were seeing. The Krath advance had stopped, not because of military defeat. The Krath still had over 350 warships. The Confederacy still had only 60. By every measure of strength, the Krath should have crushed them weeks ago. But they had stopped. They were no longer moving toward the homeworld. They were not attacking. They were not doing anything except sitting in space and waiting. "I do not understand," said Admiral Vornash. His voice was filled with wonder. "What is happening to them?" High Arbiter Selenthra looked at the intelligence reports. Krath captains were refusing orders to enter certain sectors. Crews were mutinying rather than pursue the human ship. Dozens of officers had requested transfers away from the front lines. 3 commanders had killed themselves rather than face what was hunting them. The Krath Dominion, the greatest military power in the region, was falling apart from the inside. "The human commander wishes to speak with us," said Counselor Tyven. Commander Chen entered the war room a few minutes later. She looked tired. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep, and her uniform was wrinkled. She had been awake for days, running operations, planning attacks, coordinating with her crew. But her voice was as calm and steady as ever. "You asked to see me?" said Admiral Vornash. Chen nodded. She sat down at the table and looked around at the faces watching her. "The Krath are breaking," she said simply. "Their fleet is still strong, but their will to fight is dying. They have never faced an enemy like us. They do not know how to respond." "What exactly have you been doing to them?" asked Selenthra. Chen was quiet for a moment. Then she began to explain. "Humanity learned long ago that wars are not won by destroying enemy ships. They are won by breaking the enemy's will to continue fighting. A soldier who is afraid is worse than useless. An army that believes it cannot win has already lost." She pulled up a display showing the Krath fleet formation. The Krath are conquerors. They are used to fighting enemies who stand in lines and wait to be destroyed. They are used to overwhelming force. They do not know how to fight an enemy they cannot see. They do not know how to fight an enemy who strikes from the shadows and disappears. "You are hunting them," said Admiral Vornash slowly. "Like animals." "Yes," said Chen. There was no emotion in her voice. "They have never been the prey before. They have always been the predator. Now they are learning what it feels like to be hunted, and they are learning that they do not like it." She changed the display to show the Krath command ship. "But we cannot win by fear alone. Eventually they will recover. Eventually they will find their courage again. Before that happens, we need to end this war." "How?" asked Counselor Tyven. Chen pointed at the command ship. "Lord Kethvor, he is the head of the snake. As long as he commands, the Krath will continue to fight. We need to remove him." "Kill him?" asked Selenthra. "No." Chen shook her head. "Something much worse. We are going to take him. We are going to board his flagship, capture him alive, and take him from his own ship in front of his own fleet. The room fell silent. Every face showed shock. "That is impossible," said Admiral Vornash at last. "His flagship has 6,000 warriors on board. You have 30 crew members." 23, Chen corrected him. "And it is not impossible. It is simply very difficult." She pulled up the plans of the Krath flagship. "We have been studying their ship for days. We know every corridor, every guard post, every security system. We know when they change shifts, when they sleep, when they are weakest." "Even so," said Tyven, 6,000 against 23. "We will not fight all 6,000. We will move through the ship like water through cracks in stone. We will be in and out before they know what is happening." Selenthra stared at the human commander. This woman, this small, tired woman, was speaking of boarding the most heavily defended ship in the enemy fleet as if she were describing a walk through a garden. "Why?" Selenthra asked quietly. "Why are you doing this? Why did you come here? Why did humanity send you to help us?" Chen was silent for a long moment. "Because you asked," she said finally. "You sent a message into the dark, asking for help. And we heard you. We could not ignore you. We could not pretend we did not hear." She stood up from the table. "Where I come from, we have a saying. The measure of a people is not how they treat those who can fight back. It is how they treat those who cannot. You needed help. We chose to give it." She walked toward the door. "The operation begins in 12 hours. When it is done, the Krath will leave your space and never return." She left the room. Selenthra looked at the other council members. Their faces showed the same thing she felt in her own heart: awe, wonder, and something that had been absent for many months: hope. The immortal claw hung in space, surrounded by the remains of the Krath armada. Lord Kethavor sat in his command chair and stared at nothing. He had not slept in 4 days. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the security footage, the figure in black armor, the blood, the death. He had tripled the guards throughout the ship. He had ordered constant patrols. He had sealed every entrance and exit. No one could board his vessel without being detected. He told himself this. He repeated it like a prayer. And then the lights went out. For 3 seconds, the flagship was dark. Emergency power came on, bathing everything in red light. Alarms began to scream. "What happened?" Kethvor shouted. "Unknown, my lord," an officer shouted back. "We are detecting multiple hull breaches on the lower decks." Multiple, not one. Multiple. They were already inside. Kethvor drew his weapon. "All guards to defensive positions. Protect the bridge." He could hear sounds echoing through the ship. Gunfire, screams, explosions. Getting closer. The bridge had 50 guards, 50 of the best warriors in the Krath Dominion. They formed a wall around their commander, weapons raised, ready to die. For 8 minutes they waited. The sounds of battle grew louder. Then suddenly, silence. The door to the bridge exploded inward. Kethvor saw shapes move through the smoke. Small shapes, human shapes, moving faster than anything he had ever seen. They fired as they moved, each shot finding its target with perfect accuracy. The 50 guards died in less than 2 minutes. Kethvor raised his weapon. A hand appeared from nowhere and knocked it aside. Another hand struck his throat, and he fell to his knees, choking. When he could see again, Commander Chen was standing over him. She was smaller than he had imagined. Her face was calm, almost peaceful. There was blood on her armor, but none of it was hers. "Lord Kethvor," she said, "you are coming with us." They dragged him through his own ship. He saw the bodies of his warriors everywhere, hundreds of them, dead in corridors, slumped against walls, lying in pools of their own blood. 23 humans had done this. 23 humans had cut through 600 Krath warriors like a blade through soft flesh. They reached a docking port. A small shuttle was waiting. They threw him inside and the shuttle launched, speeding away from the flagship. Kethvor looked back at his ship through the window. He saw escape pods launching. He saw smaller vessels fleeing. His crew was abandoning ship even though the ship was not destroyed. They were running. His own people were running from the humans. The Prometheus was waiting in the shadow of an asteroid. The shuttle docked, and they brought him to a small room with a single chair. They put him in the chair and left him alone. He sat there for hours, or maybe minutes. He could not tell anymore. Finally, Commander Chen returned. She sat across from him and looked at him with those calm, dark eyes. "What are you going to do with me?" he asked. His voice was rough. "We are going to let you go," she said. He stared at her. "What?" "You will return to the Dominion. You will tell them what happened here, and you will give them a message." She leaned forward. "The Valen Confederacy is under humanity's protection. This was one ship, Lord Kethivor. One ship with 23 crew members. We have more. Many more. If you return, if you continue this war, we will come for you. Not just for your fleet, for you. Personally, every commander, every general, every lord who orders an attack on the Confederacy will be found. We will come in the night when you think you are safe. We will come through walls and locked doors. We will take you from your beds, from your fortresses, from the hearts of your armies. And we will show you what happens to those who threaten the innocent." She stood up. "We have a very long memory, Lord Kethivor, and we are very patient. Leave now, and this ends. Stay, and we will teach you the true meaning of fear." They put him in a shuttle and sent him back to his fleet. 1 week later, the Krath Armada withdrew from Velen space. They did not stop at the border. They kept going, retreating deep into their own territory. The war was over. In the aftermath, High Arbiter Selenthra invited Commander Chen to the council chambers. The old woman took the human's hands in her own. "You saved us," she said. "You saved all of us. How can we ever repay you?" Chen shook her head. "You do not need to repay us. Just remember. Remember that when you were alone, when no one else would help, humanity answered your call. And someday, when you are strong again, when some other species sends a desperate message into the dark, remember what we did. Answer their call as we answered yours." Selenthra nodded slowly. "We will remember. For all time, we will remember." The Prometheus left Valen space 3 days later. Commander Chen stood on the bridge as the ship jumped to faster-than-light travel, carrying her crew home. Behind her, the Velen Confederacy began to rebuild. And across the galaxy, the story spread. The story of a small, ugly ship that had broken an empire. The story of 23 humans who had done the impossible. Other species heard the story. They heard about the ghost ship, the death hymns, the hunters in black armor. They heard about the message Commander Chen had delivered to Lord Kethivor. And they wondered, what else did they not know about humanity? What else were these strange, small, stubborn creatures capable of? The Krath never attacked the Confederacy again. They never attacked anyone again. They stayed inside their own borders, watching the stars, waiting for shadows that never came. The Prometheus became a legend, a ghost story that Krath parents told their children to make them behave, a symbol of hope for the oppressed, a warning to the powerful. One ship, 23 humans, a galaxy changed forever. This was humanity's first gift to the stars. It would not be the last.